Hi everyone, this is OC from Digital Adventures. Today we've got another great project for you. It's a project called Gravity Dodgers. And what it's going to have is going to have a hero and two enemies. Our hero is going to move left to right, and our enemies are going to come from the sky and try to get us. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to do a little more of a fluid movement. Instead of us just having a move 10 steps, what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate acceleration into our movement so it looks a little more realistic, so it looks a little more like something that would happen in real life. And so first, let me show you how this works. So we're going to click on the full screen. We're going to click on the green flag, and we're going to hit our arrow key, and we're going to go left to right. And what you see is that our character moves, our hero moves, and then if it gets hit by a block, it stops. What you'll also notice is the time increases as we go. And so the goal is to try to get the time as big as possible. But let's go ahead and build this thing out. So first we're going to clear out this old code in the hero. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start with events in our hero, and we're going to get ourselves a when green flag clicked. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into variables. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a time variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to type that in, and we're going to create time, and we're going to click OK. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to set that time variable to be 0. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a forever loop. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into control. We're going to get ourselves a forever loop. And then inside that forever loop, what we want to do is we want to change time by 1. And so we're going to get a change my variable. We're going to click the drop down. We're going to change it by 1. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to get ourselves a wait 1 second block out of control. And what that's going to do is it's going to simulate that movement, and it's going to count. So before it goes to the beginning of that forever loop, it's going to wait 1 second. If our time is changing by 1, it basically gives us an easy way to count what's going on there. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to create our movement. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a when green flag clicked. The next thing that we want to do is we want to get a motion block. So we want this thing sort of sitting down at the bottom. We want it going back and forth, but let's sort of center it at the middle of the screen there. So what we can do is we can say that we're going to have our x at 0, and we're going to make our y at -148. That's going to be at the very, very bottom of the screen. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create another variable, and we're going to call it x acceleration. And what we're going to do with that x acceleration is we're going to set that to start at 0. And what this means is that every time we press the when green flag click, it's going to reset to 0. The next thing that we want to do is we want to go into looks, and we're going to get ourselves a show block. And what that means is that it's going to pop up every time we start the game so that we know exactly where we're at. Because remember, at the end of the game, if we get hit by one of the enemies, it's going to go away. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a forever loop, and we're going to create a couple of embedded if-then conditional statements for our left and our right movement. So we're going to do one, and then we're going to do another one right beneath it, and that's going to be embedded inside of there. And what we're going to do is what we're going to start with is we're going to say that first of all, we want to make sure that we're changing x by that x acceleration. So we're going to put that at the very top of that forever loop outside of the conditional statements. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find that variable x acceleration, and we're going to put that where that number 10 was, and now we're going to always change that x by acceleration. The next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to have an input. We want to know whether or not we're pressing a keystroke. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a motion block, a sensing block. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that when key space press, we're going to put that as our left arrow. And then for the next one at the bottom here, we're going to do if the right arrow key is pressed. And that's going to allow us to sort of go back and forth there. The next thing that we're going to do is we want to have a test condition to know how fast we're going. So we're going to go into operators, and we're going to get ourselves a greater than operator. We're going to change this greater than operator to -10, and the thing that we want to be looking at is our x acceleration greater than a -10? And we're going to do the same thing but in the opposite direction. So we're going to get ourselves a less than operator, and we're going to put that in the other one, and we're going to be sensing, is that less than 10? So if it's going to the left direction, we want to make sure that it's not going faster than -10. And if it's going to the right, we want to make sure that it's not accelerating there greater than 10. So the next thing that we're going to do is that as this is going along, we want to make sure that we're changing that x acceleration. So we're going to change this first one to be change x acceleration by 1. And for the one beneath it, or change x acceleration by -1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get another one we're going to put in here. We're going to change our x acceleration by 1. And so what that's going to allow us to do is sort of like go back and forth, and that's going to simulate the movement that we want. So we can test it out and see if it works here. And what we see is that it allows us to go back and forth as we want. But what we see is that we can go off the screen, which we don't want to do. So we need to add a couple more conditions to make sure that that's not the case. We also want to be able to say if an enemy hits us, that the game is essentially over. So let's build out a couple more conditional statements. So what we're going to do is we're going to get another if-then conditional statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for a sensing block. We want to know whether or not we're touching the enemy. So one of the enemies is called them. And so if we're touching them, then what we're going to do is we are going to wait 0.25 seconds to make sure that we actually have that impact. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hide, which basically means that this goes away. And then we're going to stop the whole game. So what we're going to do is look in control and get ourselves a stop all block. And because we have two enemies, what we're going to do is we're just going to duplicate this block of code. We're going to put that right beneath it, and we're going to make sure that we change that drop down to them too. All right, so now what we should have is a condition being met that allows us to move the character back and forth. And if it gets hit by an enemy, it's going to die. So let's test that out. So what we're going to do is we move back and forth, and we see that that goes away. All right, so now we have to get our very final condition, which is going to basically say that if we get to the edge of the screen, what we want to do is we want to simulate it bouncing back and forth. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get another if-then conditional statement. And what we're going to do is we want to sense whether or not we're touching that edge. And if we're touching the edge, what we're going to do is we're going to say that we're going to have it bounce. So we're going to look for a block in motion that says if on edge bounce. And then at the same time, what we're going to do is we're going to set our x acceleration to be 0. And what that means is that if we're accelerating into the wall, we want to sort of like stop the movement so that we can go the other way. That's going to make it a little more realistic. So think about when you hit a wall, you sort of come to a stop. What we want to allow for us is to go in the other direction with that. And so what we're going to do is let's test out and see if this works. And what you might notice is that our x acceleration is showing up there. That's a way to test and see if our conditions are being met. So what we're going to do is we see that it goes back and forth. We get hit by an enemy and we die. We go to the very edge and we see what happens there. What we see is that it sort of bounces off the edge. Great. So now what we want to do is we want to program one of our enemy blocks. And what we're going to do is show you how that works. And so what we're going to do is we're going to clear out this old code. And what we're going to say is the first thing that we want to start with is a when green flag clicked. So what we go is get a when green flag clicked. Then we're going to get ourselves a hide block. And then what we're going to do is within the control, we're going to get a forever loop. Once we have that forever loop, what we want to basically say is we want it to wait for 1 second, right? So we're basically spawning ourselves. And then we're going to say we want to create a clone of ourselves, right? So this is going to allow us to sort of create those enemies over and over again. So what we've done now is we've created the enemy and it hides. But what we have to do is we want it to show up. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a block that says when I start as a clone. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to show ourselves. So we're going to get ourselves a show block. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get a motion block. And we're going to say go to XY. And within that go to XY, what we want to do is, because we want them falling from the sky, what we're going to do is we're going to hold our Y position at 180, which is essentially the top of the screen, but we're going to make it a variable and we're going to have it pick randomly between the X. And so we're going to have it vary between -240 and 240. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a couple more variables. So the next variable that we're going to create is Y speed. We're also going to create a gravity variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to say gravity. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set y speed to be equal to 0, and we're going to set gravity to be equal to 0. All right, so once we have both of those, what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a repeat until block. So we're going to get repeat until, and then what we're going to do is we're going to be testing a condition. We want to know whether or not the y position is less than 170. Essentially, like, is it at the bottom of the screen? If it's at the bottom of the screen, we want it to take certain action. And so what we're going to do is within motion, we're going to look for that y position. We're going to put it in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a change y by. And what we want to do is we want to change our y by y speed. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to get a change. And we're going to change our y speed by gravity. And so we're going to put that in here. And then at the very end, what we're going to do is we're going to say that we want to fully delete that clone because, you know, it's done its job. And so what we're going to do now is you see all these things are sort of on here. What we can do is we can hide these. We really only want time to show up. So we're going to hide those different variables. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create full screen. And what we're going to do is we see those enemies falling from the sky. And so that's basically how the project works. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.